The dust cloud rose so thick behind the fleeing stagecoach that Sarah Emerson could barely see the bandits chasing them, but she could hear their whoops and hollers cutting through the dry Arizona air like knives through butter. It was April of 1878, and the road between Tucson and the small settlement of Paradise should have been safe enough for travel. Or so the stagecoach driver had assured her that morning when she boarded with her modest trunk and carpet bag, containing everything she owned in this world. Now that same driver lay slumped forward in his seat, a bullet wound in his shoulder, the reins slack in his trembling hands as the horses ran wild with terror. Sarah grabbed for the reins herself, leaning out the window of the bouncing coach, her dark brown hair whipping free from its pins. She was 22 years old and had been traveling to Paradise to meet her intended, a merchant named Robert Crane, whom she had never met, but had corresponded with for 6 months. Her father back in Philadelphia had arranged the match before his death, and Sarah had little choice but to honor his wishes. She had no other family, no other prospects, and no other future waiting for her in the crowded eastern city, where she had spent her entire life feeling like she could never quite catch her breath. The lead horse screamed as a shot rang out too close, and then the coach was tilting, tipping, the world turning sideways in a horrible grinding crash of wood and metal and leather. Sarah felt herself thrown against the door, then against the ceiling, then tumbling out onto the hard, packed earth of the desert road. The impact knocked every bit of air from her lungs, and for a long moment she could do nothing but lie there gasping like a fish pulled from water, staring up at the brilliant blue sky that seemed impossibly vast and indifferent to her suffering. Rough hands grabbed her arms and hauled her to her feet. There were 3 of them, these bandits, their faces covered with dirty bandanas, their eyes hard and calculating as they looked her over. The driver was being dragged from his perch, groaning in pain. One of the bandits, tall and lean with cruel eyes above his mask, started rifling through the overturned coach, throwing out luggage and parcels with careless violence. "Please," Sarah managed to say, finding her voice despite the terror that threatened to choke her. "I do not have much, but what I have is all I own. I am traveling to meet my intended husband. Without my belongings, I will have nothing." The bandit holding her laughed, a sound without humor. "Ain't that a shame?" he said, his breath reeking of whiskey. "Maybe you ought to have stayed back east where you belong, lady." They took everything. Her trunk with all her clothes, carefully mended and packed. Her carpet bag with her mother's silver brush and mirror, the only things of value she possessed. The small leather pouch containing the $30 she had saved from selling her father's watch and cufflinks. They even took her bonnet, for reasons she could not fathom, leaving her bareheaded under the merciless sun. When they were done, they mounted their horses and rode off whooping and firing their guns into the air, leaving Sarah and the wounded driver standing beside the destroyed coach in the middle of nowhere. The driver, whose name she remembered was Tom, slumped to the ground, his face pale beneath the coating of dust. "I am sorry, miss," he said weakly. "Got to rest a spell. Lost too much blood." Sarah knelt beside him, tearing strips from her petticoat to bind his wound as best she could. She had no water to give him, no supplies of any kind. The horses had broken free during the crash and had run off in their panic. The sun beat down on them both, and Sarah could feel her skin already beginning to burn. She had no idea how far they were from Paradise or any other settlement. The desert stretched out in all directions, dotted with scrub, brush, and cactus, beautiful and deadly in equal measure. "You should walk," Tom said after a while, his voice barely a whisper. "Follow the road east. Cannot be more than 10 miles to Paradise. I will wait here." Maybe another coach will come. Sarah looked at the road stretching away into the shimmering heat. 10 miles might as well have been 100 in her thin-soled city shoes with no water and no protection from the sun. But staying here seemed equally impossible. Tom's eyes were closing, his breathing shallow. She felt utterly helpless, utterly alone, more frightened than she had ever been in her life. She sat down beside the wounded driver and tried to think clearly despite her panic. She needed to make a plan. She needed to figure out what to do. She needed to not give in to the despair that threatened to overwhelm her completely. But her thoughts kept scattering like startled birds, and all she could seem to focus on was the terrible thirst already building in her throat, and the awful realization that she might actually die out here in this God-forsaken wilderness. The sound of hoofbeats made her head jerk up. For one horrible moment she thought the bandits were returning, but this was just one rider, coming from the east at an easy pace. As he drew closer, Sarah could see he was tall in the saddle, wearing a wide-brimmed hat and a long brown duster despite the heat. He rode a paint horse, black and white patches gleaming in the sunlight, and even from a distance there was something steady and competent about the way he sat his mount. He reined in when he saw the destroyed coach, his eyes taking in the scene with quick intelligence. Then he was dismounting, moving toward them with long strides, and Sarah found herself looking up into the most striking face she had ever seen. He was young, perhaps 25 or 26, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of slate under stormy skies. His jaw was strong and already showing the shadow of stubble, and there was something in his expression that was both kind and fiercely competent. "What happened here?" he asked, his voice deep and calm, exactly the sort of voice you would want to hear in a crisis. Sarah found herself stammering as she tried to explain. "Bandits. They attacked us perhaps an hour ago. They took everything. The driver is wounded. I do not know what to do." The man knelt beside Tom, examining his wound with practiced efficiency. "I have seen worse," he said. "The bullet went clean through. He needs a doctor and rest, but he will live if we can get him to town." He looked up at Sarah, and she felt something shift in her chest at the directness of his gaze. "You hurt anywhere, miss?" She shook her head. "Just bruised, I think. Nothing serious." "Good." He stood and walked back to his horse, retrieving a canteen and a bundle from his saddle bags. He offered Sarah the canteen first. "Drink slow. Not too much at once." The water was the best thing she had ever tasted, cool and clean and life-giving. She forced herself to follow his instructions, taking small sips even though she wanted to gulp the entire contents. He gave water to Tom as well, then pulled out a clean bandage and rebandaged the driver's wound properly. "What is your name?" Sarah asked, watching him work with quiet efficiency. "Xavier Hartley," he said without looking up. "Most folks just call me Xav. I work a small spread about 5 miles south of Paradise. Was heading into town for supplies when I came across you." "I am Sarah Emerson. I am traveling to Paradise to meet my intended husband." Something flickered in Xavier's eyes at that, but he just nodded. "Well, Miss Emerson, lucky for you I came along. Paradise is only about 8 miles up the road. I can take you there and we can send someone back for Tom and the coach." "I cannot ride a horse," Sarah admitted, feeling foolish and helpless. "I have never learned." Xavier looked at her for a long moment, and she could not quite read his expression. "You are going to have to learn today," he said finally. "Cannot leave you out here, and my horse can carry double for 8 miles easy enough. You will ride in front of me, and I will make sure you do not fall." The thought of being so close to this stranger, of being held by him, made Sarah's cheeks burn. But what choice did she have? She nodded mutely. Xavier helped Tom into a more comfortable position in the shade of the overturned coach, leaving him with the canteen and a promise that help would come soon. Then he turned to Sarah and held out his hand. "Come on, Miss Emerson. Let us get you somewhere safe." His hand was warm and calloused when she took it, strong and steady as he helped her to her feet. She was trembling, she realized, shaking like a leaf in autumn, though whether from fear or relief or something else entirely she could not say. Xavier led her to his horse and mounted first, then reached down and pulled her up in front of him with seemingly effortless strength. She found herself seated sideways across the saddle, held securely by his arms on either side of her as he gathered the reins. "Hold on to the saddle horn," he instructed. "I will not let you fall, but it will be a more comfortable ride if you brace yourself a little." Sarah gripped the horn with both hands as the horse started moving. She had never been on a horse before, and the height and movement were terrifying at first. But Xavier's presence behind her was solid and reassuring, his arms forming a protective barrier around her. She could feel the warmth of his chest against her back, could smell the scent of him, leather and horse and something clean like sage. Despite everything that had happened, despite her fear and her losses, she felt oddly safe. They rode in silence for a while, the desert landscape rolling past them in shades of brown and gold and dusty green. The sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that took Sarah's breath away. She had never seen such colors, such vastness. Philadelphia had been all narrow streets and tall buildings, the sky cut into small pieces by roof lines and chimneys. Here the world felt limitless and wild and strangely beautiful. "You said those bandits took everything?" Xavier asked after a while. "Everything," Sarah confirmed, her voice bitter. "My clothes, my money, even my mother's brush and mirror. All I have left is what I am wearing." "Did you get a good look at them? Would you recognize them again?" Sarah thought back to those terrible moments. One of them was tall and thin, with cold eyes. Another was shorter, stocky. "I am sorry, I cannot remember more. Their faces were covered." Xavier was quiet for a moment. "Sounds like it might be the Garrett gang. They have been working this stretch of road for a few months now. Sheriff has been after them, but they are slippery. How much money did they take from you?" $30. It was everything I had." Her voice broke a little on the last word. "That is not right," Xavier said quietly, and there was steel in his voice. "A man has no business robbing anyone, but robbing a woman traveling alone is about as low as it gets." "I do not suppose there is any chance of getting it back," Sarah said. "Maybe, maybe not, but we can try." Sarah turned her head to look at him, surprised. "You would do that? You do not even know me." His eyes met hers, and again she felt that strange shift in her chest, like something settling into place. "Does not matter if I know you or not. What matters is what is right and what is wrong. Those men wronged you. If there is a way to set it right, then it ought to be done." They continued riding, and Sarah found herself relaxing slightly despite everything. There was something deeply reassuring about Xavier Hartley, something that made her feel like perhaps things might work out after all. She started to ask him about his ranch, curious about this life that was so different from anything she had ever known. But before she could speak, they came over a rise, and she could see paradise laid out below them in a shallow valley. It was smaller than she had expected, just one main street with perhaps 20 buildings total. But there was a church with a white steeple, and she could see what looked like a hotel and a general store, and a building with a sign that said Paradise Saloon. Smoke rose from several chimneys, and she could see people moving about in the evening light. It looked like civilization, like safety, and Sarah felt tears prick her eyes with relief. Xavier rode straight to the sheriff's office, a small wooden building with barred windows and a sign hanging over the door. He dismounted first, then helped Sarah down with the same easy strength. Her legs were shaky when her feet hit the ground, and she would have stumbled if Xavier had not steadied her with a hand on her elbow. "Wait here just a moment," he said. "Let me talk to the sheriff." Sarah waited, suddenly aware of how she must look with her hair wild and her dress torn and dusty from the crash. A few townspeople were staring at her with open curiosity. She tried to smooth her hair back, but without her pins it was hopeless. She felt exposed and vulnerable and completely out of place. Xavier emerged from the sheriff's office with a middle-aged man wearing a tin star. The sheriff had shrewd eyes and a weathered face that had seen plenty of trouble in its time. He tipped his hat to Sarah. "Miss Emerson, I am Sheriff Dalton. Xavier here tells me you were robbed and your driver wounded. I am mighty sorry to hear that. I will get some men together and ride out to bring Tom back and see what can be salvaged from the coach." "Thank you, Sheriff," Sarah said. "I appreciate your help." The sheriff turned to Xavier. "You did good bringing her in, Xav. I will take care of things from here." But Xavier shook his head. "If it is all the same to you, Sheriff, I would like to help Miss Emerson get settled first. She has had a rough day and she does not know anyone in town besides me." Sheriff Dalton's eyebrows rose slightly, but he nodded. "Suit yourself. Miss Emerson, do you have family or friends in Paradise? Somewhere you can stay?" "I am here to meet Robert Crane," Sarah said. "He is expecting me. We are to be married." The sheriff's expression changed, becoming uncomfortable. He glanced at Xavier, then back at Sarah. "Miss Emerson, I am afraid I have some bad news. Robert Crane passed away 3 weeks ago. There was an accident at his store. A shelf collapsed and struck him on the head. He lingered for a few days, but he never woke up. I am very sorry." The words seemed to come from very far away. Sarah heard them, understood them, but could not quite process what they meant. Robert Crane was dead. The man she had traveled all this way to marry, the future she had planned, the security she had counted on, all of it was simply gone. Combined with the robbery and the crash and everything else, it was too much. She felt the world starting to tilt and sway, felt her knees beginning to buckle. Strong hands caught her before she fell. Xavier lifted her easily, cradling her against his chest. "Where can I take her?" he asked the sheriff urgently. "Mrs. Patterson runs a boarding house just down the street, the place with the blue shutters. She will have a room." Sarah wanted to protest that she could walk, that she did not need to be carried like a child, but she seemed to have lost the ability to speak. Everything felt unreal, like she was watching it happen to someone else. She was vaguely aware of movement, of Xavier carrying her down the street, of people stopping to stare, of a door opening and a woman's voice, high and concerned. Then she was being laid on a soft bed in a room with faded floral wallpaper. A plump woman with kind eyes was pressing a cool cloth to her forehead, murmuring soothing words. Xavier stood in the doorway, his hat in his hands, looking worried. "She has had a terrible shock," the woman was saying. "Poor dear. First the robbery, then finding out about Mr. Crane. She needs rest and a good meal and some peace and quiet." "I will pay for her room," Xavier said. "She has no money. The bandits took everything." "You are a good man, Xavier Hartley," the woman said. "Your mother raised you right, but what is to become of this poor girl? She cannot stay here indefinitely without means to pay." "I will figure something out," Xavier said firmly. "Just take care of her for now, Mrs. Patterson. I will be back tomorrow to check on her." Sarah tried to sit up, to tell him he did not need to do that she was not his responsibility. But exhaustion was crashing over her in waves, and Mrs. Patterson was gently but firmly pressing her back down against the pillows. The last thing she saw before her eyes closed was Xavier's face, his expression troubled but determined, before the darkness claimed her completely. She woke to bright sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of coffee and bacon drifting up from somewhere below. For a moment she could not remember where she was, and then it all came flooding back. The robbery. The crash. Xavier Hartley. Robert Crane was dead. She was alone in a strange town with no money, no belongings, no prospects. The situation was so dire that she almost laughed, except she was afraid if she started she might become hysterical. There was a gentle knock on the door, and Mrs. Patterson bustled in carrying a tray. "Oh good, you are awake, dear. I brought you some breakfast. You must be starving." Sarah realized she was ravenous. She could not remember the last time she had eaten. Mrs. Patterson set the tray on her lap, and Sarah attacked the food with undignified haste, barely tasting it as she shoveled scrambled eggs and bacon and toast into her mouth. "There now, that is better," Mrs. Patterson said approvingly. "Nothing like a good meal to help a body face troubles. I took the liberty of washing and mending your dress last night. It is hanging in the wardrobe, and I have some spare things that might fit you, at least until you can get proper clothes. We are about the same size, or at least we were before I took to eating too many of my own biscuits." Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes at this kindness from a stranger. "Thank you," she whispered. "I do not know how I will ever repay you." "Nonsense. We take care of our own in paradise. You are here now, so that makes you one of us." Mrs. Patterson paused, then said more gently, "Mr. Hartley came by early this morning asking after you. He seemed very concerned. I told him you were still sleeping, and he said he would be back around noon. That boy has a good heart." Sarah nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She finished her breakfast, then washed using the basin and pitcher Mrs. Patterson had left for her. Her dress had been cleaned and mended with tiny, careful stitches. She dressed slowly, braiding her hair as best she could without a mirror. Mrs. Patterson had left a simple gray skirt and white blouse that were a bit loose but serviceable. There was even a pair of worn but sturdy boots that fit reasonably well. When she made her way downstairs, she found Xavier Hartley sitting in the parlor, his hat balanced on his knee. He stood when he saw her, his eyes searching her face with obvious concern. "Miss Emerson, how are you feeling?" "Better, thank you, Mr. Hartley. I do not know how to thank you for everything you have done. You saved my life yesterday." He waved off her thanks with obvious discomfort. "Anyone would have done the same. Miss Emerson, I have been thinking about your situation. You have no money and no belongings. You came here expecting to marry Mr. Crane, but that is no longer possible. What are your plans now?" Sarah sank into a chair, the weight of her circumstances pressing down on her. "I do not know," she admitted. "I have no family back east, no one to return to. My father's death left debts that took everything we had. That is why he arranged my marriage to Mr. Crane. It was to have been a fresh start." Xavier was quiet for a moment, turning his hat in his hands. "I have a proposition for you. It might not be proper, and you are free to say no, but hear me out before you decide." Sarah looked at him, curious and slightly wary. "I have a ranch about 5 miles south of here. It is not much, just a small spread with maybe 200 head of cattle and a modest house. But it is mine, free and clear. My parents left it to me when they died of fever 2 years back. The thing is, I am struggling to keep up with everything that needs doing. The house has fallen into disrepair. I cannot cook worth a damn, excuse my language, and I am behind on things like mending clothes and such. I need help, Miss Emerson. I need someone to keep house and help with the domestic side of running a ranch." He paused, meeting her eyes directly. "I am offering you a job, room and board plus a wage. Nothing fancy, but honest work and a safe place to stay while you figure out what you want to do next." You would have your own room, and I give you my word I will behave with complete propriety. Mrs. Patterson can vouch for my character if you want to ask around town about me." Sarah stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. A job, a place to stay, security, at least for the time being. It was more than she had any right to hope for under the circumstances. "Why would you do this for me?" she asked. "You do not know me. I could be lazy or incompetent or dishonest." Xavier smiled slightly, the first real smile she had seen from him, and it transformed his face completely. "Call it a gut feeling. You seem like good people, Miss Emerson, and I am a pretty good judge of character. Besides, anyone who keeps their head well enough to try to tend a wounded man in the middle of the desert after being robbed and nearly killed, well, that tells me you have grit. That is worth more than gold out here." Sarah thought about her alternatives. She could try to find work in town, but she had no skills that would be useful. She could try to earn money for a ticket back east, but she had nothing to go back to. Xavier's offer was generous and, if he was being honest about his intentions, perfectly respectable. She would be a housekeeper, nothing more, and it would give her time to figure out what to do with her life. "I accept," she said, lifting her chin. "But I want to be clear about the terms. I will work hard and keep your house and cook your meals, but this is strictly a business arrangement. I will not be taken advantage of." "Understood," Xavier said seriously. "You have my word, Miss Emerson. I will treat you with nothing but respect." They shook hands on it, his grip warm and firm. Mrs. Patterson, who had been hovering in the doorway, clapped her hands together. "That is wonderful. Xavier, you bring her back to town every Sunday for church. That way everyone can see she is being treated right, and there will be no unseemly gossip." Xavier nodded. "That is a good idea, Mrs. Patterson. Miss Emerson, I need to pick up those supplies I came for. Can you be ready to ride out in about an hour?" "I have nothing to pack," Sarah said with a trace of bitterness. "I am ready whenever you are." Mrs. Patterson insisted on packing a bundle of clothes for Sarah, refusing to take no for an answer. "You cannot work in just one outfit, dear. I have plenty of things I do not wear anymore. Consider it a loan until you can replace them." An hour later, Sarah found herself mounted in front of Xavier on his horse again, riding south out of Paradise toward his ranch. The desert looked different in the full light of day, less menacing somehow. She could see the beauty in it now, the subtle colors and the way the light played across the landscape. Hawks circled lazily overhead, and once she saw a roadrunner dart across their path. "Tell me about your ranch," she said, wanting to fill the silence. "My father built it from nothing," Xavier said, and she could hear the pride in his voice. "He came out here after the war, wanted to start fresh. He married my mother in Tucson, and they worked that land together for 20 years. Built the house themselves, cleared the grazing land, fought off rustlers and drought and everything else the desert could throw at them. When they died, I was only 23. I thought about selling and moving on, but I could not do it. That ranch is part of them, part of me. It is where I belong. It must be lonely," Sarah ventured. "Sometimes," Xavier admitted, "but I have always been more comfortable with animals than people. Cattle do not talk back or complain about burnt stew." Sarah found herself laughing, surprised that she could feel anything like humor after the past day. "I should warn you, I am not an expert cook. My father and I lived simply after my mother died, but I can manage basic meals. Anything is better than what I have been eating," Xavier assured her. "My last attempt at making biscuits, I swear you could have used them for cannonballs." They rode on, and Sarah found herself relaxing into the rhythm of the horse's gait, into the solid warmth of Xavier behind her. She had been terrified when she first mounted yesterday, but now it felt almost natural. The desert was growing on her too, this harsh, beautiful land that was so different from everything she had known. When they came over a rise, Xavier pointed ahead. There it is, home. Sarah looked and saw a small ranch house nestled in a valley with cottonwood trees growing along what must be a creek bed. There was a barn and several corrals, and she could see cattle grazing in the distance. The house itself was single-story, built of adobe with a wide porch running along the front. It looked solid and welcoming despite its obvious need for repairs. As they drew closer, Sarah could see what Xavier had meant about the house falling into disrepair. Several porch boards were broken, the windows were grimy, and the whole place had an air of neglect about it. But the bones were good, and she found herself already planning what could be done to fix it up. Xavier helped her down from the horse and led her inside. The interior was dim and dusty, furnished with simple handmade furniture. There was a main room with a fireplace, a kitchen area, and two smaller rooms that must be bedrooms. Everything was covered in a fine layer of dust, and she could see cobwebs in the corners. "I know it is not much to look at right now," Xavier said apologetically. "I have been focusing all my energy on keeping the ranch running, and I have let the house go." Sarah rolled up her sleeves. "Show me where you keep your cleaning supplies." Xavier looked surprised. "You want to start now?" "You just got here. You should rest." "Mr. Hartley, I am not made of glass. Show me where things are and I will get started. The sooner I make this place livable, the sooner we can both settle into a proper routine." He showed her around, pointing out where he kept rags and soap and brooms. The kitchen had a good iron stove and a pump that brought water up from the well, which was a luxury she had not expected. There was a pantry stocked with basic supplies, flour and beans and dried meat, though everything was disorganized and dusty. Xavier left her to it, heading out to tend to his cattle. Sarah started in the kitchen, scrubbing every surface until it gleamed. She found herself oddly content in the work, taking satisfaction in seeing the grime give way to clean wood and iron. She organized the pantry, swept and mopped the floors, shook out the rugs. By the time the sun was starting to set, she had the main room and kitchen spotless. She started dinner, something simple but filling with beans and salt pork and biscuits. She was determined to prove that her biscuits, at least, could not be used as ammunition. Xavier came in just as she was setting the table, his eyes widening as he looked around. "Miss Emerson, this place looks better than it has in 2 years. You did all this in one afternoon." Sarah felt a small glow of pride. "I work quickly when I have a goal. Dinner is ready if you want to wash up." They sat down to eat together, and Sarah felt a strange intimacy in the simple act of sharing a meal. Xavier ate with obvious appreciation, complimenting her cooking even though it was nothing fancy. They talked about the ranch, about what needed to be done, falling into an easy conversation that felt natural despite the fact that they had only known each other for a day. After dinner, Xavier showed her to her room, a small space with a narrow bed and a dresser. "I know it is not fancy, but it is clean and private. I sleep in the other room and I will respect your space. You have my word on that. Thank you, Mr. Hartley, for everything. I know I have said it before, but I truly cannot express how grateful I am. Please call me Xavier or Xave. Mr. Hartley was my father." He paused at the door. "And Miss Emerson, you do not owe me gratitude. You are earning your keep. This is fair exchange, nothing more." But it felt like more than that. Sarah thought as she lay in her narrow bed that night, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the desert night. It felt like Xavier Hartley had given her back everything the bandits had taken and more. They had taken her belongings, her security, her future. Xavier had given her work, shelter, and perhaps most importantly, had given her back her dignity. She was not a charity case. She was an employee earning her way. That meant everything. The next few weeks fell into a comfortable routine. Sarah rose early and had breakfast ready when Xavier came in from his morning chores. She spent her days cleaning and mending and cooking, slowly transforming the house into a real home. She discovered she had a talent for it, for making spaces warm and welcoming. She sewed new curtains from fabric Xavier bought for her in town. She planted herbs near the kitchen door. She even tackled the broken porch boards herself, figuring out how to replace them through trial and error. Xavier proved to be a man of his word in every respect. He treated her with unfailing courtesy, never overstepping the bounds of propriety. But Sarah found herself looking forward to their meals together, to their evening conversations on the porch as the sun set. He told her about his life, about growing up on the ranch, about his dreams of expanding his herd and building something lasting. She told him about Philadelphia, about her father and her life back east, about the strange mixture of grief and relief she felt at leaving it all behind. "Do you miss it?" Xavier asked one evening. "The city, I mean." Sarah thought about it. "Not as much as I expected. I miss some things. The theaters, the museums, the sense of being part of something large and important. But I do not miss the crowds or the noise or the feeling of being closed in all the time. There is something about this place, about the space and the silence. It feels like I can breathe here." Xavier smiled. "I know what you mean. I went to Tucson once for a cattle sale and could barely stand it for 2 days. All those people, all that noise. Give me open range and starlight any day." On Sundays, Xavier kept his promise to Mrs. Patterson, bringing Sarah to town for church. The townspeople were curious about the arrangement but seemed to accept it, especially once they saw how respectful Xavier was and how hard Sarah worked. Women invited her to quilting circles and social gatherings. Men tipped their hats and called her Miss Emerson. Slowly, paradise was becoming home. Sarah found herself watching Xavier when he did not know she was looking. The way he moved, economical and graceful. The way he treated his animals, firm but kind. The way his face looked in the lamplight as he read from the newspaper in the evenings. He was handsome. She had known that from the first moment she saw him, but it was more than that. He was good, genuinely good in a way that seemed rare and precious. She tried not to think about the fact that she was falling in love with him. It was impossible, of course. He had offered her a job, a business arrangement. He had never indicated that he felt anything for her beyond friendly respect. And she had no business developing feelings for her employer, especially when she was dependent on him for everything. It would be inappropriate and complicated and probably disastrous, but her heart did not seem to care about logic. It was a Saturday afternoon in late May when the Garrett gang struck again. Sarah was in the kitchen making bread when she heard the thunder of hoofbeats and loud voices. She looked out the window to see 3 men on horseback surrounding Xavier out by the barn. Even from a distance, she recognized the cruel stance of them, the menacing way they sat their horses. Her blood ran cold. She grabbed Xavier's rifle from where it hung by the door and ran out onto the porch. Xavier saw her and his face went pale. "Sarah, get back inside." But Sarah had not survived the robbery and the crash and the complete upending of her life just to hide while these men threatened the one person who had helped her. She raised the rifle, her hands shaking but her voice steady. "You men need to ride out of here, right now." The tallest one laughed, and Sarah recognized that laugh, that cruel sound from the day they had robbed the stagecoach. "Well, well, if it is not the little lady from the coach, you got some grit after all. But that rifle is bigger than you are, sweetheart. Why don't not you put it down before you hurt yourself?" "I know how to shoot," Sarah lied. She had never fired a gun in her life, but she had watched her father clean his pistol enough times to have a general idea of how they worked. "And if you do not leave right now, I will prove it." Xavier's face was grim. "She is not joking, Garrett, and neither am I. You have 5 seconds to get off my land before I consider you hostile intruders and act accordingly." The standoff seemed to last forever, the 3 bandits weighing their options against 2 armed people who looked ready to defend their home. Finally, Garrett spat in the dirt. "This is not over, Hartley. We will be back." "I will be ready," Xavier said flatly. The bandits wheeled their horses and rode off, and Sarah felt her legs start to shake so badly she had to lean against the porch post for support. Xavier was at her side in an instant, gently taking the rifle from her hands. "That was the bravest and most foolish thing I have ever seen," he said, and his voice was rough with emotion. "Sarah, if anything had happened to you, I could not have lived with myself. You should have stayed inside where it was safe." "They were threatening you," Sarah said, and she was surprised to feel tears streaming down her face. "I could not just hide and do nothing. Xavier, those were the men who robbed the stagecoach. I am sure of it. I know." Xavier's jaw was tight. "I am riding into town to tell the sheriff." "They are getting bolder, and that means they are getting more dangerous. I want you to come with me. I do not want to leave you here alone." They rode to Paradise together, and Sheriff Dalton listened to their story with a deepening frown. "That is the 3rd ranch they have threatened this month. They are looking for easy targets, testing who will fight back and who will not. Xav, you need to be careful. These men will not hesitate to kill if they think they can get away with it." "I know, Sheriff. That is why I am here. We need to do something about them before someone gets hurt." "I am working on it," Dalton said. "I've got men watching the likely hideouts and I have sent word to the territorial marshal. But in the meantime, you watch your back. And Miss Emerson, you did good standing up to them, but your employer is right. Next time, stay inside and keep your head down." They rode back to the ranch in silence, both of them lost in thought. Sarah kept replaying the confrontation in her mind, feeling the fear all over again. But there was something else too, something that had crystallized in that moment of danger. She loved Xavier Hartley. She loved him with a certainty that went bone deep, and she had been willing to risk her life to protect him. That night, Xavier was quiet through dinner, barely eating. When they finished, he did not go out to the porch as usual. Instead, he stood by the fireplace, staring into the empty grate. "Xavier, what is wrong?" Sarah asked gently. He turned to look at her, and the expression on his face made her breath catch. "I have been thinking about what happened today, about how close we came to real trouble. Sarah, I need to be honest with you. When I saw you standing there with that rifle, ready to face down 3 armed men to protect me, it made me realize something." Sarah's heart was pounding so hard she thought he must be able to hear it. "What did you realize?" "That somewhere along the way this stopped being just a business arrangement for me." Xavier took a step toward her. "Sarah, I have feelings for you. I have been trying to ignore them, trying to be professional and proper, but after today I cannot keep pretending. I care about you, deeply. And if you do not feel the same way, I understand, and I will never mention it again. But I had to tell you, I had to be honest." Sarah felt like her heart might burst right out of her chest. "You care about me." "More than I have ever cared about anyone," Xavier said quietly. "You have brought life back into this house, into me. Everything is better with you here. The food tastes better, the sunsets are more beautiful, even the work feels lighter because I know you are here. I am sorry if this is unwelcome. I know you came here planning to marry another man, and I know I am just a rancher with dirt under his fingernails and nothing much to offer, but I had to say it." Sarah crossed the room to stand in front of him, looking up into his face. "Xavier, you have given me everything. You gave me safety when I was in danger, work when I was helpless, respect when I had no reason to expect it. You have treated me with more kindness and consideration than anyone in my entire life. And somewhere along the way, I fell in love with you." She saw the hope flare in his eyes. "You love me?" "Yes," Sarah said simply. "I love you." Xavier cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle despite the calluses on his palms. "Sarah, I need you to be sure. Because once I kiss you, once we cross this line, I am not going to want to go back. I am going to want to court you proper and eventually marry you if you will have me. I am going to want to build a life with you. So you need to be absolutely certain this is what you want." "I am certain," Sarah whispered. "I have never been more certain of anything." Xavier kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. Sarah felt like she was finally, truly home, not in the house or the ranch or even paradise. Home was wherever Xavier was. They pulled apart slowly, Xavier resting his forehead against hers. "I want to do this right," he said. "Court you properly with flowers and picnics and everything you deserve. Will you let me do that, Sarah? Will you let me court you?" "Yes," Sarah said, smiling. "Yes to all of it." The next few months were the happiest of Sarah's life. Xavier courted her with old-fashioned dedication, bringing her wildflowers from the range, taking her on rides to see the sunset from high points, reading to her in the evenings. They talked about everything and nothing, learning each other's minds and hearts. The physical attraction between them was intense, but Xavier was determined to behave honorably, never pushing beyond what was proper for a courting couple. The townspeople of Paradise watched their romance with approval. Mrs. Patterson declared herself a matchmaker of great skill, since she had suggested the Sunday church visits that had allowed everyone to see how good Xavier and Sarah were together. Sheriff Dalton good-naturedly threatened Xavier with dire consequences if he did not treat Sarah right, though everyone could see that was never going to be a problem. In July, the Garrett gang was finally captured. Sheriff Dalton tracked them to their hideout with help from the territorial marshal and several deputized townsmen. There was a brief shootout, but in the end, all 3 gang members were taken alive and jailed to await trial. The sheriff recovered most of what they had stolen from various robberies, including some jewelry and money. He came to the ranch to tell Xavier and Sarah the news. "There is $30 here that was taken from the stagecoach robbery, Miss Emerson. I think that is rightfully yours." Sarah stared at the money, remembering how desperately she had needed it just a few months ago. Now it seemed like such a small thing. "Thank you, Sheriff, but I would like to donate it to the church fund. Pastor Johnson was saying they need a new roof." Dalton smiled. "That is mighty generous of you, Miss Emerson." After he left, Xavier pulled Sarah into his arms. "You have changed so much since you came here, grown stronger, more confident. I am proud of you." "I had a good teacher," Sarah said, kissing him softly. In August, Xavier proposed properly, getting down on one knee on the front porch at sunset with a simple gold ring that had belonged to his mother. Sarah said yes, before he could even finish asking the question, laughing and crying at the same time. They were married in September at the church in Paradise, with the whole town in attendance. Mrs. Patterson cried through the entire ceremony. Sheriff Dalton gave Sarah away, since she had no family of her own. That night, in the house that was now truly theirs together, Xavier carried Sarah over the threshold and set her down gently in the main room. "Welcome home, Mrs. Hartley." "I have been home for months," Sarah said, pulling him down for a kiss. "Anywhere with you is home." Their wedding night was everything Sarah had hoped for, tender and passionate and full of love. Xavier was gentle with her inexperience, taking his time, making sure she felt cherished and desired. Afterwards, lying in his arms in the darkness, Sarah thought about the girl she had been when she arrived in Arizona. That girl had been lost and frightened and alone. The woman she had become was strong and loved and exactly where she belonged. The years that followed were good ones. The ranch prospered under their joint management, Xavier handling the cattle and the land, while Sarah managed the household and the finances. They expanded their herd and eventually bought the neighboring property when old Mr. Simmons decided to retire. Sarah discovered she had a talent for raising chickens and started selling eggs in town, building up a tidy side business. In the spring of 1880, Sarah gave birth to their first child, a son they named Thomas after the stagecoach driver who had survived his wounds and eventually recovered. The boy had his father's dark hair and his mother's determination. 2 years later came a daughter, Grace, with Xavier's gray eyes and Sarah's smile. Sarah sometimes thought about those terrible hours after the robbery, when she had been stranded and helpless and certain her life was over. How strange that the worst day of her old life had led directly to the best days of her new life. The bandits had taken everything from her, every physical possession and plan she had. But Xavier had given it all back and so much more. He had given her a home, a purpose, a family. He had given her love. They added more children over the years, until the house rang with laughter and noise and the beautiful chaos of a large family. Sarah taught her daughters to be strong and self-reliant, to never be helpless in the face of adversity. Xavier taught his sons to be honorable and kind, to always help those in need. On their 10th anniversary, they stood together on the porch watching the sunset, just as they had on so many evenings before. The ranch stretched out before them, prosperous and well-tended. Their children played in the yard, their voices high and happy in the evening air. "You ever think about how we met?" Xavier asked, his arm around Sarah's waist. "All the time," Sarah admitted. "I think about that girl who was so frightened and lost, and I barely recognize her." "I recognized something in her the moment I saw her," Xavier said. "I saw strength and courage and grace under pressure. I saw everything I wanted in a partner. I just had to wait for you to see it too." Sarah leaned into him, comfortable and content. "You gave me everything, Xavier. You saved my life." "No," Xavier said seriously. "You saved yourself. I just gave you the opportunity to show what you were really made of. Sarah, you were never helpless or weak. You were always strong. You just needed the chance to prove it." They stood together as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. Inside the house, Sarah could hear Mrs. Patterson, who had come for dinner, organizing the children for their bedtime routine. The older woman had become like a grandmother to their children, a treasured part of their extended family. In the years that followed, Paradise continued to grow and prosper. Sarah became known throughout the territory as a woman of intelligence and compassion, someone who could be counted on to help in times of crisis. She organized a school for the town's children and taught reading to anyone who wanted to learn, adult or child. Xavier served on the town council and was eventually elected mayor, though he insisted Sarah was the real politician in the family. They faced hardships together, as all couples do. There were droughts that tested their resources and their faith. There was the year when fever swept through the territory and they lost their youngest daughter, little Emma, before she was even 2 years old. That grief nearly broke them both, but they held each other through the darkest nights and slowly learned to live with the loss, carrying it together. But there were far more joys than sorrows. They celebrated as each of their children grew and married and started families of their own. Xavier taught his grandsons to ride and rope, just as his father had taught him. Sarah passed down her mother's silver brush and mirror to her eldest daughter on her wedding day, explaining how they had once been lost and then, in a way, found again in something even more valuable. On their 25th anniversary, the town of Paradise threw them a party. It seemed like the entire territory turned out to celebrate the couple who had become pillars of the community. There were speeches and toasts, and a cake so large it required its own table. Sarah stood with Xavier's hand in hers and looked around at the faces of friends and family, at the life they had built together, and felt overwhelming gratitude. When the party was winding down and they finally had a moment alone, Xavier pulled Sarah into a dance even though the musicians had long since stopped playing. They swayed together in comfortable silence, needing no music beyond the beating of their hearts. 25 years, Sarah marveled. Sometimes it feels like just yesterday that you rode up to that overturned stagecoach. Other times it feels like I have known you my entire life. 25 years and you still take my breath away, Xavier said, kissing her forehead. Every single day I wake up grateful that I happened to be riding that road at that exact moment. Best decision I ever made, stopping to help. It was not a decision, Sarah pointed out. You are too good a man to have ridden past someone in need. Maybe, but I am glad it was you. I am glad I got to be the one who helped you, who got to witness you becoming the amazing woman you are. Sarah, you have given me a life beyond anything I could have imagined. You have given me children and grandchildren and a home full of love. You have made me happier than any man has a right to be. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. After 25 years, this man could still make her cry with his sweet words. We made this life together, Xavier. Every bit of it we built side by side. They continued to dance. Two people who had found each other when they each needed saving, who had built something beautiful and lasting from a chance encounter on a desert road. The years continued to pass, marked by the changing of seasons and the growing of their family. Their eldest son Thomas took over much of the day-to-day running of the ranch as Xavier grew older. But Xavier still rode out most mornings, unable to fully give up the work that had defined his life. Sarah remained active in town affairs, her opinion sought on everything from school policies to territorial politics. When Arizona finally achieved statehood in 1912, Sarah and Xavier celebrated with the rest of the territory. They were in their 50s by then, their hair showing silver, their faces lined with the marks of years lived fully. But the love between them had only deepened with time, growing from that initial spark of attraction into something solid and enduring and essential. They sat on their porch that night, watching fireworks light up the sky over Paradise, and Sarah thought about the long road that had brought her to this moment. From Philadelphia to Paradise, from being stranded and robbed to being surrounded by love and family and community. From being Sarah Emerson, lost and alone, to being Sarah Hartley, beloved wife and mother and grandmother. "What are you thinking about?" Xavier asked, ever attuned to her moods even after all these years. "Just how grateful I am," Sarah said simply, "for everything, for you." Xavier took her hand, his grip still strong despite the arthritis that was starting to affect his joints. "The gratitude is mutual, my love. You have been my partner in every way that matters. I could not have done any of this without you." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the celebration, knowing that they had been part of building this state, this community, this life. They had contributed something meaningful, raised good children who were raising good children of their own, built a legacy that would outlast them both. As they grew older, they slowed down but never stopped. Xavier finally let Thomas take over the ranch completely when he was 60, but he still rode out to check on things, unable to stay away from the land he loved. Sarah continued her teaching until she was 65, only stopping when her eyesight began to fail, and she could no longer read the primers easily. They spent more time on the porch then, the two of them, watching the world go by and reminiscing about the years they had shared. They talked about the early days when they were young and the ranch was struggling, and they had only each other to rely on. They talked about their children and grandchildren, watching with pride as the next generation made their own marks on the world. On a warm evening in June of 1920, 42 years after that fateful day when Xavier had ridden up to an overturned stagecoach, they sat together on their porch for the last time. Sarah had been feeling poorly for weeks, though she had tried to hide it from Xavier. But he knew her too well, saw past her brave face to the pain she was trying to conceal. "Sarah," he said gently, "we should send for the doctor." She shook her head. "I do not need a doctor to tell me what I already know. I am tired, my love, so very tired." Xavier felt fear clutch at his heart, but he tried to keep his voice steady. "Then rest. I will be right here beside you." Sarah turned to look at him, her eyes still bright despite her failing body. "Xavier, I need you to listen to me. I need you to know that these 42 years have been the greatest gift of my life. You saved me in every way a person can be saved. You gave me love and purpose and a family. You gave me everything. Sarah, please do not talk like that. You are going to be fine. You are strong. You have always been strong." "I was strong because of you," Sarah said, reaching for his hand. "Because you believed in me even when I did not believe in myself. Because you loved me so completely that I had no choice but to become the woman you saw when you looked at me. Xavier, I love you. I have loved you since the moment you reached down to help me onto your horse. I will love you beyond this life into whatever comes next." Xavier was crying now, tears streaming down his weathered face. "I love you too. God, Sarah, I love you so much. I do not know how to do this without you." "You will be fine," Sarah assured him. "You have Thomas and Grace and all our grandchildren. You have the ranch and the land you love. You will be fine." But she was wrong. Xavier lasted only 6 months after Sarah passed away peacefully in her sleep that night. The doctor said it was his heart that finally gave out, but everyone who knew them understood that he had simply been unable to live without her. They were buried side by side in the Paradise Cemetery, under a cottonwood tree with a view of the desert they had both come to love. Their children and grandchildren mourned them but celebrated them too, telling stories of their love and their life together. The ranch stayed in the family, passed down through the generations along with the story of how Xavier had saved Sarah and how Sarah had saved Xavier right back. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the sun sets over the Arizona desert in shades of orange and pink, people swear they can see 2 figures on the porch of the old ranch house, sitting together in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out over the land they loved. Just a cowboy and the woman he saved, together for eternity, exactly as they were always meant to be. The story of Xavier and Sarah Hartley became legend in Paradise. Parents told their children about the young woman who had been stranded by bandits and the cowboy who had given her everything back and more. Much more. Not just her belongings or her security, but a life full of love and purpose and meaning. Young couples would visit their graves, hoping some of that enduring love would bless their own marriages. The ranch remained a working spread for over 100 years, a testament to the foundation they had built together. But beyond the legend, beyond the stories and the romance of it all, what Xavier and Sarah had really found in each other was partnership in its truest sense. They had faced every challenge together, celebrated every joy together, built a life together from the foundation of mutual respect and love and unwavering commitment. They had taken a chance encounter on a desert road and turned it into a love story for the ages, proving that sometimes the worst moments can lead to the best outcomes. And that true love, when found, can weather any storm and last beyond a lifetime. Their legacy lived on not just in their descendants or the ranch or even the town, but in the example they set of what love could be when two people fully committed to each other and to building something meaningful together. They had shown that love was not just a feeling but a choice, made every day, to stand beside each other no matter what came their way. And that perhaps was the greatest gift they gave back to the world that had once seemed ready to take everything from Sarah that terrible day in 1878. The Bandits had taken everything, but Xavier gave it all back and more, so much more. He gave her a life, a purpose, a family, and a love that transcended time itself. And she had given him the same, transforming his lonely existence into something rich and full and meaningful. Together, they had created something beautiful and lasting, a love story that would be told for generations, inspiring others to believe in the power of kindness, courage, and love.